Asterisk, have you ever felt that sinking feeling when something just doesn't add up in your relationship? That's where our story begins today. If you're enjoying this journey into the complexities of trust and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human emotion. Asterisk. The first time Michael noticed something was off, it was nothing dramatic, just a text message that appeared and disappeared too quickly on Sarah's phone when he walked into the room. He wouldn't have thought twice about it if not for the way her smile seemed forced afterward, how her laugh carried a nervous edge he'd never heard before in their 8 years of marriage. Michael Donovan had always prided himself on being a rational man. At 42, he'd built a respectable career as an architect, designing spaces where families could build their lives together. The irony wasn't lost on him that his own foundation now felt like it was cracking beneath his feet. Sarah, his wife of 8 years, had been acting differently for months now. Late nights at the office, new clothes, a password suddenly appearing on her phone, all the clichés he dismissed when friends complained about their own relationships. "You're being paranoid," he told himself one Tuesday evening as he sat alone at their dining table, the dinner he'd prepared growing cold in Sarah's absence. She'd called an hour earlier, her voice slightly breathless, explaining that a client meeting was running late. It was the third time this week. Michael stared at the untouched plate across from him, remembering how they used to share every detail of their days over dinner. When had the silences started stretching between them? When had her eyes stopped meeting his for more than a few seconds at a time? The house they'd bought together 3 years ago, a charming colonial with the wraparound porch Sarah had always wanted, suddenly felt too large, too empty. He wandered into their home office and found himself standing before the corkboard where they'd pinned their dreams. Vacation photos from Costa Rica, sketches of the children's rooms he'd designed, though those children had never arrived, despite years of trying, paint swatches for renovations they'd planned together. His fingers traced the edge of a photo, Sarah laughing on their anniversary trip last year, her head thrown back in genuine joy. When was the last time he'd seen her laugh like that? The next morning, Michael woke to find Sarah's side of the bed already empty. A note on the kitchen counter explained she had an early meeting. Her handwriting seemed hurried, the "love you" at the bottom an afterthought. That day at work, Michael couldn't focus on the commercial property plan spread across his desk. Instead, he found himself opening a browser window and typing, "Signs your wife is cheating." The results made him feel simultaneously foolish and terrified. Every article listed behaviors he'd been witnessing for weeks: emotional distance, unexplained absences, sudden attention to appearance, guarding her phone. "Everything okay, Mike?" His business partner, James, stood in the doorway, concern etched across his face. Michael quickly closed the browser. "Yeah, just distracted." James stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "You've been distracted 4 weeks now. What's going on?" "The dam broke." Michael found himself confessing his fears, each word making the possibility more real. "I think Sarah might be having an affair." James settled into the chair across from him. "That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have beyond her being busy and a little distant?" "That's just it," Michael said, running his hands through his hair. "Nothing concrete. Just a feeling. But we've been together for 10 years, married for 8. I know when something's wrong. Have you tried talking to her?" Michael shook his head. "Every time I try, she says everything's fine, just work stress. But then she's smiling at her phone when a text comes in, or she's taking calls in another room. So what are you going to do? Hire a private investigator? Install spyware on her phone?" James asked, his tone making it clear he found both options distasteful. "No," Michael said firmly, though the thought had crossed his mind. "I won't become that person." But that night, as Sarah once again came home late smelling of unfamiliar cologne she explained away as, just from hugging a client goodbye, Michael felt something harden inside him. He needed to know the truth, one way or another. The next day, instead of going to work, Michael sat in his car a block away from their house. He watched as Sarah left at her usual time, dressed more carefully than her job as a mid-level marketing manager seemed to warrant. He followed her at a distance, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure she would somehow hear it from her own car. To his surprise, Sarah drove not to her office downtown but to a small cafe in a neighborhood they rarely visited. Michael parked across the street, watching as she entered the cafe, checked her appearance in the reflection of the window, and then took a seat at a table by the window. 10 minutes later, a man arrived. Tall, distinguished, with silver threading through dark hair. Sarah stood to greet him, and they embraced for a moment longer than seemed appropriate for colleagues. They sat close, talking intently, Sarah's hands animated in a way they hadn't been when describing her work to Michael in months. Michael felt physically ill. He couldn't hear their conversation, couldn't read their lips, but the body language was unmistakable. The way she leaned toward this stranger, the way her fingers occasionally brushed his arm, the intimate smiles they exchanged, it all confirmed his worst fears. He wanted to storm into the cafe, to demand answers, to create a scene worthy of the betrayal he felt. Instead, he started his car and drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding himself at James's door. "I followed her," he admitted as James handed him a whiskey. "She met some guy at a cafe. They looked close." James sighed. "That doesn't necessarily mean." "You didn't see them," Michael interrupted. "The way they looked at each other. She hasn't looked at me like that in. I don't even remember." "So what now?" Michael stared into his glass. "I don't know. Confront her? Divorce her? Pretend I don't know and hope it's just a phase?" "Before you do anything drastic," James said carefully, "are you sure you have the whole picture? Marriage is complicated. People are complicated. What more do I need to see?" Michael asked bitterly. "The truth," James said simply. "Not just what you think you saw, but the whole truth." That night, Michael returned home to find Sarah cooking dinner, humming to herself. She greeted him with a quick kiss that felt like a betrayal. "How was your day?" she asked, stirring something that smelled delicious. "Enlightening," he answered, watching her closely. "Yours?" "Busy," she said, not meeting his eyes. "The Henderson campaign is taking all my time lately." The lie hung between them. There was no Henderson campaign. Michael had checked her company's website that afternoon. For a week, Michael lived in this strange limbo, watching his wife live a double life. He followed her twice more, each time seeing her meet the same man. He searched her emails when she left her laptop open, finding nothing suspicious. He checked her call logs when she was in the shower, discovering a number that appeared frequently but was saved only as DC. The weight of his suspicion and surveillance was crushing him. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on work. The man he saw in the mirror each morning was becoming someone he didn't recognize, hollow-eyed, suspicious, angry. On a rainy Saturday morning, as Sarah announced she needed to run to the office for a few hours, something in Michael snapped. "Who is he?" he asked quietly as she gathered her keys. Sarah froze. "What?" "The man you've been meeting. Silver hair, expensive suits. The one you've been lying about." The color drained from Sarah's face. "You've been following me? You've been lying to me." Michael's voice rose. "4 months, Sarah. Months of late nights and secret texts and passwords on your phone. What was I supposed to think?" Sarah sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Michael demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." Sarah closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "His name is David Collins. He's a therapist." Of all the responses Michael had prepared for, this wasn't one of them. "A therapist?" "Yes," she whispered. "I've been seeing him twice a week for the past 4 months. Michael stared at her, confusion replacing anger. Why? Why would you hide that from me? Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a pain he hadn't allowed himself to see. Because I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that I want to stop trying. Stop trying what? To have a baby, Michael. Her voice broke. For years, 3 miscarriages. I can't do it anymore. It's breaking me. Breaking us. But I know how much it means to you, how much you want to be a father. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes. The room seemed to tilt around Michael as the implications of her words sank in. All this time, he'd been constructing a narrative of betrayal when Sarah had been carrying this burden alone, afraid of hurting him. The late nights, he asked, his voice hollow. Sometimes therapy. Sometimes just driving around, trying to find the courage to talk to you. Sometimes sitting in empty parking lots crying because I feel like such a failure. She wiped her eyes. The password on my phone was to hide the fertility apps I deleted, the therapy appointments, the support group chats where I could be honest about how I'm feeling. Michael crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Why couldn't you tell me? Because you designed that beautiful nursery. Because you keep talking about names and schools and the future. Because every time I see you with our nieces and nephews, I see the father you should be. She squeezed his hands. I was afraid you'd leave me if you knew I wanted to stop trying. Leave you? Michael echoed, stunned. Sarah, I would never. Wouldn't you? She challenged gently. If I told you I wanted to accept that we might never have biological children? If I said I can't handle another loss, another round of hormones, another month of disappointment? Michael was silent, confronting the truth in her words. Had he been so focused on the family he imagined that he'd failed to see what it was costing the woman he loved? David has been helping me find the words, Sarah continued. Helping me work through the grief and guilt. He specializes in fertility trauma and marriage counseling. The cologne I smelled? Sarah gave a watery laugh. He wears this awful aftershave. I've been meaning to tell him it's too strong. Michael felt shame wash over him. I thought. I convinced myself. That I was cheating. Sarah finished. Is that what you think of me? Of us? I didn't know what to think, Michael admitted. You were slipping away from me, and I didn't know why. It was easier to blame someone else than to consider that I might be the problem. They sat in silence for a long moment, the rain tapping against the windows like a metronome counting the seconds of their shared pain. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to talk to you, Sarah finally said. I'm sorry I didn't create a space where you felt you could, Michael replied. That afternoon, they talked more honestly than they had in years. Sarah shared the depths of her grief over their fertility struggles, the toll it had taken on her body and spirit. Michael admitted his fear that without children, he would somehow have failed at life's most important task. What if we considered other options, he suggested tentatively. Adoption? Fostering? Sarah looked at him with cautious hope. You'd be open to that? I want a family with you, Michael said, realizing the truth of it as he spoke. How that family comes to us matters less than the fact that we build it together. The next week, Michael joined Sarah at a session with David Collins. The man who had featured as a villain in Michael's imagination turned out to be a compassionate professional who helped them navigate the difficult conversations they needed to have. Over the following months, Michael and Sarah rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of painful but necessary honesty. They packed up the nursery together, donating the unused baby items to a local shelter. They attended support groups for couples facing infertility. They began researching adoption agencies. 1 year later, they sat in their living room with a social worker, discussing the possibility of becoming foster parents to a sibling group, 3 children who needed a stable home after years in the system. Are you sure you're ready for this? The social worker asked. 3 children is a significant challenge, especially for first-time parents. Michael looked at Sarah, seeing the strength and love that had always been there, even when he'd been too blind to recognize it. She nodded slightly, a smile playing at her lips. "We've learned that family isn't about perfect circumstances," Michael told the social worker. "It's about perfect commitment. We're ready to commit to these children, whatever challenges come with them." 2 months later, their home was filled with the sounds Michael had always dreamed of: children's laughter, occasional tears, the beautiful chaos of family life. It wasn't the path he had imagined, but as he watched Sarah helping their oldest foster daughter with homework while the younger two built a fort in the living room, he knew it was exactly where they were meant to be. The journey had nearly broken them. His suspicion, her secrecy, both had threatened to destroy what they'd built together. But in the end, it was the painful truth that had saved them, allowing them to find their way back to each other and forward to a new definition of family. That night, as they lay in bed with the sounds of their foster children sleeping peacefully down the hall, Sarah turned to Michael in the darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "The way things turned out?" Michael thought about the man he'd been a year ago, consumed by suspicion and fear, following his wife through the rain. He thought about the pain they'd both carried alone, too afraid to share it. And he thought about the family they were building now, imperfect and beautiful in ways he couldn't have imagined. "The only thing I regret," he said, pulling her close, "is that I almost lost us trying to protect an idea instead of loving the reality." Sarah rested her head on his chest, her heartbeat syncing with his. "I'm glad you followed me that day," she whispered. "As angry as I was, it forced us to face the truth." "The truth," Michael repeated, thinking of how differently this story could have ended if he'd confronted her with accusations instead of questions, if he'd trusted his fears more than their history together. "Sometimes it's not what we expect, but it's always what we need." Outside their window, rain began to fall again, but this time it sounded not like a countdown to loss but like the gentle rhythm of renewal, washing away the past and nourishing the future they were growing together. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of human connection, forgiveness, and the unexpected paths that lead us to our truest happiness. Remember, in your own relationships, communication and trust can overcome even the darkest suspicions. Until next time, thank you for joining us on this emotional journey.